In myth busting, rules and roleplay, Alex and I discuss some old-fashioned preconceived ideas around BDSM and kink. We also take a look into the kink social scene and a world that has its own rules and regulations. It's an explosive episode, so not one to miss. Welcome back to the Life of Tash Mia. I'm Tash. So, do you feel the beast inside of you ready to unleash? Well, I certainly do today, and so does my guest. Alex is back once more. Welcome back, Alex.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the misconceptions and myths around BDSM and the kink world. So let's get straight into it. Alex, what do you think is some of the biggest misconceptions about BDSM? Because there are a lot out there.
I would say the biggest misconception is definitely in relation to the pain. Mm-hmm. People assume that it is going to be painful. The minute you say, oh, let's try some BDSM, someone's like, I'm not into pain.
Yeah.
So that would be the first misconception because, as we've discussed previously, there is so many different avenues in which you can take BDSM, which does not actually include pain. Pain is only one of them.
Yeah.
So there's many misconceptions about that to start with. The other one is definitely that it's abuse.
Yeah.
Where it's really got nothing to do with that. It's all about consent and power play and enjoying that relationship with give and take.
Yeah.
It's got nothing to do with abuse of power.
Yeah. And also I think with that idea around it's to do with abuse is people also make the assumption that if you're practicing BDSM, you come from trauma. Now, why you've disclosed you are someone who did have trauma in your childhood, you worked through it way before you ever went into BDSM. But I think there's a big misconception that anyone who does BDSM has had trauma, which is they've done studies to show that there's no increased, if you take like a sample size from the population of someone who is practicing BDSM and a sample size of people who don't, there is actually no increase in the percentage of people who have suffered trauma in their past.
No, absolutely. I feel like it has nothing to do with trauma. I feel like people that have had trauma in their past and have healthily processed that may be more inclined to be open-minded to a lot of what the BDSM world is and what it means.
Yeah.
And because you have processed difficult emotions probably earlier on throughout your life, you're therefore more equipped to deal with probably the grey area that a lot of people don't want to go into because you have seen things and heard things and way earlier than you're supposed to. And so therefore you've processed that and developed that and matured quickly. So I think you understand the human condition better and human emotions better because of having to process things earlier.
Yeah. What are some other misconceptions you think are out there about BDSM or misconceptions about being a dominatrix?
Well, being a dominatrix, for starters, one of the misconceptions I did say was that you must hate men.
Yeah, being a man hater.
Because of the things, or you like to be dominant, so you can't be a woman.
Yeah.
There must be something wrong with you because you have that dominant side. But I believe that as we're getting more empowered as women, that it's definitely less of an objection.
Yeah.
But there is still those misconceptions.
And it's true. I think you can even say, in relation to the non-kink world, women's sexual liberation is kind of going in parallel with our financial independence and freedom. And I think it's interesting to see whether that also will be reflected in the BDSM community, whether we will see, more female doms emerge. I know you've said to me in the past, sometimes you're at kink socials and you're the only female dom in the room.
Yeah, that's one of the things that surprised me was I thought I was walking into a room of like-minded and supportive people, but especially in the Australian kink scene, there is still this perception that the woman is submissive and that the men are more
That's the
dom.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was a surprise to me because it's supposed to be that safe space of exploration.
Yeah.
It's not there yet in
Yeah.
Australia. They haven't got it right. And it's actually harder for the submissive men to admit and to find a comfortable space to express that within the kink community, because there is a lot of dominant men within the kink community, which therefore feel like that's emasculating.
Yeah. I think there's two really good points we've just kind of touched upon there. The first being this idea of a sub being emasculated. Now, I see you and your partner walk into the room and I definitely don't see an emasculated man. Your partner is very masculine. And so I think that's a massive misconception about it. If you're sub, you're emasculated. You know, you're taking away a part of your masculinity. Considering that we're in, you know, we're saying, you know, the Australian culture where, you know, I think there is this big push on being a man, you know, being the tough, you know, Aussie man. Do you think that could be a reason why when you go to a kink social, you could be the only female dom in that room?
Yeah, within Australia, that's definitely very prominent.
Yeah.
And people are still shocked when I explained that I'm the dominant within my relationship, because they see that as being, even in a kink accepted environment, still the weird.
Yeah. Still the not the norm.
Yeah.
And I think that leads people to having to practice in, as we said, the closet, in the kinky closet. You know, I would say a good 60 to 70% of my clients, possibly even higher, I am the only person that knows they are a sub. The only person in their world that knows they're a sub. And I actually find that really disheartening, to be honest. And that was one of the reasons why I really wanted to start my brand. You know, my first goal was to empower females to embrace their sexuality. But my second brand goal was to de-shame kink for this exact reason, because I would have clients constantly coming into the studio ashamed of it, or starting the conversation with, this is probably really weird. You know, I hear that the amount of times I've heard this is probably really weird before they tell me their kink or fetish or whatever it is. And I'm always like, it's not weird. Like, you are definitely not the first person to tell me you have this kink. You know what I mean? But I think it's true. We live in a very sexually conservative society here. People think of Australians, they think laid back Aussies, but when it comes sexually, I would say we're up with one of the most sexually conservative in the world, especially if you compare us to like places like Europe.
I'd agree with that, because as I said, I thought I was going into where I would see other dominant women and their submissive partners, along with the male dominant and the female submissive, but I thought there'd be more representation of what I am in my personal life, but it's still not represented in that space very vividly.
Yeah. And I think that shows you, you know, the kink world is not perfect. You know, the non-kink world is not perfect. And I don't want people thinking that we're saying, you know, we do say a lot of great things about the kink world. It is, you know, a great place. They are very inviting. You know, kink people generally are very open and inviting people. The funniest thing is, though, it's very hard to tap into, I find. You know, clients that I've seen that may be quite new to kink will say, like, how do I meet other people into this? You know, how do you find out about kink socials? And you know, things I found out most about kink on the social side of things have been from like other clients or other people who are already in the kink scene. How does one get into the kink scene if you really don't have any contact with someone else who's already in it?
This day, it's easier because you can search online for these things. Sydney, Australia definitely has an active scene, so you can Google what apps you would require to download so that you would then set up a profile and you would begin to talk to like-minded people. You don't need your face on these profiles.
Yeah.
So it's definitely more about talking about what your preferences are. And through those apps, you would see a lot of advertised events. So the Fet Gala is one of my favorites that happens every year. And so a lot of like-minded people. And through Sydney especially, we are just about to go in to celebrate the Mardi Gras in Sydney. So there's a lot of actual events specifically for fetish throughout that period. So 100% get online and have a look because the official sites will tell you where to go for the fetish side of it.
Yeah. Can you describe what the kink scene is like? I mean, I know you're Sydney based, so what is the kink scene kind of doing these days? What's your feel on it in Sydney?
As I said, I think it's still the most quiet of all the sexual scenes, and BDSM, I feel, is still regarded as the most out there. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people still haven't explored that or still don't understand a lot to do with it. So even in the Sydney space and even in the fetish space, kink space, there is still that area of misconception of a lot to do with what we do. So it needs a lot more understanding, which is why I think it's great that we're having this conversation, because even in the kink world, there's still room to improve in Australia for that.
Yeah. So we're at these kink socials. You walk into the room, you've been having some nice chats. You've now taken the time to exhale and look around the room. What type of people are at these kink socials?
I've mentioned newbies before, and every time you go, you will have a range of different experiences within the room. So you'll see the keen couples walking around very excitedly, exploring different little areas of the kink night and really getting to the front line for every demonstration. So you will see your newbies there, and they're very keenly asking questions.
Yeah.
Which is exciting. I love to see that. And they're very lit up. You see people who are very shy and they come alone, and it might be a submissive male and he's walked into the room and he's very lonely because that's his natural state. And he's just quietly going around trying not to be noticed.
Yeah.
However, they always find me. And
Hiding to the V.
Yeah, definitely. They'll find me and they'll be like, mostly probably because I'm a woman in latex and
a hot woman in latex.
And they will come, and I'm definitely very welcoming to the submissive males because you don't see them often enough, but you will be able to see them in the room. There's the experienced people who are confidently introducing new people to each other.
Yeah.
So
nice.
it is welcoming in the fact that the experienced people will definitely welcome. But everybody is welcome to come.
Yeah.
Buy a ticket and you're welcome. And
what about just thinking about the backgrounds of these people? You know, ethnicity, jobs, status in society. Is there a particular, portion of society you say comes along, or is it really like, all colors of the rainbow?
It's all colors of the rainbow. It is everybody.
Yeah.
So everybody is welcome. As I said, if you buy a ticket, you're welcome.
Yeah. I must admit, I remember one of the first kink socials I ever went to was Hellfire, which no longer runs in Sydney at least. And I still remember it as the night that I was most complimented on ever in my life. And you're right. I still remember it as, one of those nights everyone was coming up to me and chatting with me. And like, that doesn't happen when you just go out in Sydney. Do you know what I mean? It's actually quite divided, I think, if you're going out socially in Sydney in the non-kink world. But it's a very different experience in that scene.
I think people we all know what we're there for.
Yeah.
So that gives a topic of conversation.
Yeah.
So therefore it's a safe place to talk to people.
Yeah.
Whereas when you go out, normally you stick to your friends, you stick to people you know, you don't. And if you approach someone in a bar, they will assume that you're trying to pick them up. So there's none of that.
That element is removed.
That element is totally removed because it's a safe space to talk about sexuality.
Yeah.
So that's 100% where you will find the difference. And why I love going to these things so much is because you can talk to like-minded people and people who are open-minded enough to accept different avenues of life.
What happens at kink socials?
Kink socials.
Because I think they can be a bit daunting for someone that they've never gone to one, you know what I mean? And they found out, maybe they've got online, they've got their profile up, and they found out there's, you know, this kink social coming up and it's a Friday evening or something. What can they expect?
So most of them will have a theme, or it might just be latex theme or black. It might be something, I mean, it's Valentine's Day coming up.
Red. Wear red.
Wear red. So a lot of them will have a theme. Most of them, it is around fetish gear. So it could definitely be latex based. I always wear latex to anything to do with fet.
Can't go wrong with latex.
You can't go wrong with latex. Exactly.
Except for sweating balls.
So I would wear latex. When you walk in, look, everybody is very friendly. And because they're open-minded about talking about everything, you will find, even if you don't find your exact space, as I said, I'm still often the only dom woman in the room. So I don't find my exact someone like me in the room. But I will find a lot of people that are very open to discussing, oh, you do that. What does that mean? What's that like? Because people still don't quite understand. So there's a lot of those questions. And because obviously I've been doing this for years and I know how to train, I've actually had couples ask me, oh, would you train us? Because we don't know what we're doing. We're new to this. So there is a lot of newbies.
Yeah.
There's actually newbie nights.
Yes. Yeah.
So you can go along, and that you will find all newbies who are more open to going, oh, what have you tried, and things like that. So there is a lot more of that open conversation, and I definitely think we've got that part right in Australia, is accepting people and being more open to talk about things.
Yeah. So you've rocked up to this kink social, you're having a chat with some people. Are there any activities going on at these parties?
They always have amazing shows.
Yeah.
So they will hire people within the scene to do demonstrations of different sorts. So often there's a rigger there who's very, very well trained.
Rigger being is someone who does the rope tying.
Yeah, so bondage, there will be displays of all of those sorts of things. So you can get to watch people do that. And often the person who's doing the show will stick around and talk to people afterwards and help, even do little demos on them to explain, this is how you tie people and things like that. Or this is my card, you can contact me and I can teach you how to do those sorts of things. But it's definitely eye-opening for newbies who haven't been, because they'll finally find that it is acceptable to be able to do these things comfortably within a space.
Yeah. And there's never any pressure to participate in the play.
No, and most of the time you can go in plain clothing. Like if you don't have anything latex, please don't stop from going. Yeah. Like explain that you can wear, just wear all black, for instance, and go. They will often give a couple of options so that you feel comfortable to go, because honestly, we want more people to explore this space.
Yeah, yeah. I wanted to move the chat to a little bit about the non-kink versus kink world, because I think there's a lot of things that the non-kink world could learn from the kink world, especially when it comes to like dating and things. What do you think is the best things that the non-kink world can learn from the kink world?
Communication
Yeah.
and consent
Yeah.
would be the top things to talk about. Communication between your partner, your sexual likes, your sexual dislikes, just having a safe space for that in every relationship. So I definitely think that they can be more open to those, talking and exploring the sexual side of yourself. A lot of people are still very quiet when it comes to their own sexual preferences, and I feel that they could learn a lot from the community, because just being willing to talk about it, and having a partner who is willing to listen and try and understand, I think, is something that people can definitely learn from.
I think you're right. Communication is a big one. I've always said that if you can't communicate, you're not going to do very well in the BDSM kink scene, or you're going to get very good at it very quickly. Because if you can't communicate, it's not going to be a enjoyable ride, I don't think. And consent, you said, was the second one.
Yeah, definitely. That is still an issue today.
Yeah.
I know you spoke about previously a friend that had a situation. I feel like every woman knows a woman.
Yeah.
Or it's not just restricted to women,
Yeah.
obviously.
It works both ways, but I always say to people, think about when you've been on a date and it's got to that stage of a dates or on the date of question, and you've gone into an intimate scene with someone. And nearly anyone you talk to can think of a time when someone has just done something during that play, I'm talking non-kink world here, or on a date, that they never asked you prior about. They never asked for your permission. And it's kind of just accepted. And I think that's my kind of biggest gripe with, non-kink world and dating, is I still think we've got quite a way to go with consent. And I think that comes back down to, though, your first point, which is communication, because people don't know how to communicate about it. They don't want to ask beforehand, hey, like, I'm into this type of thing. Is it something you might want to try with me? Do you know what I mean? I don't think they actually have the language to have that conversation first.
No, and it's maturity to be able to have those tough conversations about emotions and preferences, because just because you say you like something doesn't mean that you're criticizing something that they have done previously.
Yeah.
So in a relationship sense, you need to be comfortable to hear someone out without taking it personally.
Yeah. And I also think as the partner, you need to be very careful of how you receive it. And, if you are willing enough to open up, if your partner is willing to open up to you enough and tell you about, this is what I've been thinking, these are some things I want to try, and your reaction is, oh my God, that's so weird, that's going to be a dead end for any future conversations. So I think it's really important that people realize that not only do you need to find the language to explain what you're into and what you're thinking, or kinks, or whatever it may be, I think you have to be very conscious of how you're receiving that information and how it's being perceived that you're receiving that information.
Yeah, and I think that comes to emotional maturity.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I feel that's where a lot of relationships lack, and that's why there are a lot of problems in every relationship.
Yeah.
We need to be more open and honest about things, and realize that when someone is being open and honest about their sexual preferences, it has nothing to do with any other person.
Yeah, definitely. So I know we've said consent and communication, some two massive things we think that the non-kink world really can learn from the kink world. I also think boundaries is one that kind of comes from that naturally. We've talked about you set up limits when you play, and you're actually providing boundaries for which that play occurs. So I think people in the kink world have a very good understanding of boundaries and what is and isn't acceptable. Do you think in the non-kink world that one can benefit from learning that? Do you think it helps not just in your relationships, like your romantic relationships, but also, you know, friends and family?
It's definitely something. Boundaries is such a big thing. When you go into especially a fet gala or a kink party, people won't touch you.
Yeah.
It is a very polite, very respectful space.
Yeah.
And everybody knows that there are boundaries that are set in place for these kind of parties. So a lot of people there will be in fetish gear, or lingerie, for instance. You would never go out in lingerie in society and not expect something inappropriate. Unfortunately. Yeah. Whereas you can definitely go to this space and your boundaries are respected automatically.
Yeah.
Because there is tough consequences for anything that would go wrong. So that's definitely in place and a very secure part of this world to explore. I think, unfortunately, it's not the same.
Yeah. I just want to quickly pick up on one of the things you said. You know, if you don't respect those boundaries or behave correctly in a BDSM social, you get weeded out pretty quick. That's something I think takes a lot longer in the non-kink world. You know, there's been people mistreating other people in the non-kink world. I don't want to get gender specific here, but it takes a lot longer for them to get weeded out because no one knows about it. You get weeded out very quickly in the kink world.
Yeah, it wouldn't. No, you would get a bad reputation really, really quickly and you would be banned.
Yeah, definitely. So I'd like to end on a positive note, and I want to know, what do you think is the best thing about being a part of the kink world for you?
The best thing is being 100% true to myself and my sexuality and being able to express that freely.
I love that. Well, it's been another great episode with Alex. Talked about some misconceptions about BDSM, busted some more myths, and talked about what the non-kink world can learn from the kink world. So I hope everyone has learned something. And as always, stay kinky.